Sarah Thompson rubbed her tired eyes as she pulled into the parking lot of the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center in Atlanta. The early morning sun was just beginning to peek through the clouds, but a long line of voters had already formed outside the polling station. As a civil rights attorney with 15 years of experience, she had seen many election days, but something felt different about this one. She stepped out of her car, clutching her coffee cup, when her phone buzzed. It was a text from her colleague, Marcus Washington, a local journalist. Multiple complaints coming in. Voters being turned away. Need you here ASAP. Sarah quickened her pace, her heels clicking against the pavement. As she approached the entrance, she could hear raised voices and see frustrated faces in the crowd. An elderly woman was arguing with a polling official, her voice trembling with emotion. "I've been voting here for 40 years, the woman said, holding up her ID. "How can you tell me I'm not in the system?" The polling official, a young man who looked uncomfortable in his blue-collar shirt, kept repeating the same phrase. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the computer shows you're not eligible to vote. You'll have to file a provisional ballot." Sarah moved closer, her legal instincts kicking in. She noticed something odd. It wasn't just one or two people being turned away. Every few minutes, another black voter was told there was a problem with their registration. Some were longtime residents who had voted in every election for decades. Others were young first-time voters who had registered months ago and brought all the required documentation. "Excuse me," Sarah said, approaching a middle-aged man who had just been turned away. "I'm Sarah Thompson, a civil rights attorney. Could you tell me what happened?" The man, who introduced himself as Robert Jackson, showed her his driver's license and voter registration card. "They're saying I'm not in the system," he said, shaking his head. "Been living here 25 years, never missed an election. Now suddenly my registration is gone." Sarah pulled out her notebook and started taking names. Robert Jackson, Maria Foster, James Wilson, Tanisha Brooks. The list grew longer by the hour. All black voters, all previously registered, all suddenly not in the system. She called other polling stations across Atlanta. The pattern was the same. In predominantly black neighborhoods, voters were being turned away due to mysterious technical issues with the new voter verification system. At noon, Sarah stood in the parking lot, making another call to the election protection hotline when she noticed a young poll worker slipping out the back door. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 20, looked nervous as she approached Sarah. "Miss Thompson," the girl whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm Jenny, I work inside. There's something wrong with the system. It's not just glitching. It's like it was designed to do this." Sarah's heart began to race. "What do you mean?" "The new verification software they installed last month. It's marking people as ineligible for no reason, but only in certain precincts, only certain." Jenny's voice trailed off as another poll worker stepped outside. She quickly walked away, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. By late afternoon, Sarah had documented over 200 cases at this polling station alone. She sat in her car, reviewing her notes when her phone rang. It was Marcus Washington. "Sarah, you need to see this," Marcus said, his voice urgent. "I'm getting reports from Augusta, Savannah, Columbus. It's happening all over Georgia. Thousands of black voters are being turned away. This isn't a glitch. This is systematic." Sarah looked through her windshield at the people still waiting in line, some for hours, determined to exercise their right to vote. Many had brought chairs, water bottles, and snacks, refusing to leave despite being told they might not be able to vote. "Send me everything you have," Sarah told Marcus, "and contact every civil rights organization in the state. This isn't over." As the sun began to set, Sarah watched an elderly man help his wife walk slowly away from the polling station, both turned away after 50 years of voting in every election. She gripped her steering wheel tightly, anger and determination rising in her chest. This was just the beginning, and she knew that what they would uncover in the coming days would shake the very foundation of American democracy. What she didn't know yet was that the voter suppression they were witnessing was only the tip of a much larger, more sinister iceberg. Marcus Washington sat at his cluttered desk in the Atlanta Daily News office, surrounded by empty coffee cups and stacks of voter complaints. His computer screen showed hundreds of unread emails from people across Georgia, all telling similar stories about being turned away from polling stations. "This doesn't make any sense," he muttered, running his hands through his short black hair. He had been a journalist for 12 years, but this story felt different. Bigger. More dangerous. His phone buzzed. It was Sarah Thompson. "Marcus, I've got something," she said, her voice excited. "Remember the poll worker I told you about? Jenny? She just sent me screenshots of the new voter verification system." Marcus sat up straighter. "What do they show?" "The system is flagging voters as potentially ineligible based on what they're calling data inconsistencies. But here's the strange part. It's happening mostly in neighborhoods that are over 90% black. And get this, the system was updated just 3 weeks before the election." Marcus quickly opened a new document and started typing. "Who approved the update?" "That's where it gets interesting," Sarah replied. "The paperwork was signed by someone named James Chen from the IT department. But when Jenny asked around, nobody in it knows who he is." Marcus felt the familiar tingle of a big story. He grabbed his jacket and car keys. "I'm heading to the county elections office. Meet me there in 20 minutes. The county elections office was a plain brick building with American flags hanging out front. When Marcus arrived, Sarah was already there, talking to a young black woman who looked nervous. "This is Jenny," Sarah said as Marcus approached. "She's willing to show us exactly how the system works." Jenny led them to a small conference room and pulled out her laptop. Her hands shook slightly as she logged into the voter verification system. "Look at this," Jenny said, pointing to the screen. "When we enter a voter's information, the system runs it through something called Advanced Voter Verification Protocol. It's supposed to check for things like address changes or death records. But watch what happens." She typed in the information for Robert Jackson, the voter Sarah had met yesterday. The screen flashed red. "Verification failed. Further documentation required." "Now watch this," Jenny said. She changed only one detail, the voter's race from black to white. The screen immediately turned green. "Voted are verified." Marcus whistled softly. "Can you show us more examples?" For the next hour, Jenny demonstrated case after case. The pattern was clear. Black voters were being flagged at an alarming rate, while white voters with the same background sailed through the system. "There's more," Jenny said, lowering her voice. "I found something in the system logs. Late-night access from an IP address that doesn't belong to our network. Someone's been remotely accessing the system, making changes." Sarah pulled out her phone and started recording. "Jenny, would you be willing to make a statement about what you've shown us?" Jenny hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "Yes, this isn't right. People need to know." Just then, the conference room door opened. A tall man in a suit stood there, his face stern. "Jenny Williams, your access to the system has been terminated. Please leave the building immediately." Jenny's face went pale, but Sarah stepped forward. "I'm her legal representative. Any action against her for exposing potential election fraud." "This meeting is over," the man interrupted. "Security will escort you out." As they were led to the parking lot, Marcus noticed a black SUV with tinted windows pulling up to the building. 2 men in dark suits got out and headed inside. "They're trying to cover this up," Sarah said, watching the men disappear through the doors. "But they don't know what we already have." Marcus nodded, clutching his notebook. "We need to move fast. I've got contacts at other newspapers, TV stations. We need to get this story out before they can bury it." "Be careful," Jenny said, her voice shaking. "The people behind this, they have a lot of power." As they walked to their cars, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at midnight. Carter Library parking lot. I know who James Chen is. Come alone." Marcus showed the message to Sarah. They shared a look. They both knew this story was about to get much bigger and much more dangerous. What had started as a simple investigation into voter suppression was leading them into something far darker than either of them had imagined. The Carter Library parking lot was dark and empty when Marcus arrived at midnight. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he scanned the shadows. The only light came from a flickering street lamp near the entrance. He checked his phone again. Sarah had insisted on waiting nearby, parked just around the corner, ready to call for help if something went wrong. "Better safe than sorry," she had said. A soft tap on his passenger window made him jump. A young Asian man stood there, wearing a hoodie and carrying a laptop bag. Marcus unlocked the door. You must be James Chen, Marcus said as the man slid into the seat. The real James Chen, the man corrected, glancing nervously at the rearview mirror. Someone stole my identity to access the election system. I'm an IT specialist at the county elections office, but I've been on medical leave for the past month. Marcus took out his recorder. Mind if I record this? James shook his head. That's why I'm here. People need to know the truth. He opened his laptop and typed rapidly. Look at this. These are the system logs from the past 3 months. The screen showed lines of code and access timestamps. Marcus wasn't a tech expert, but even he could see something was wrong. See these login times? James pointed. 3 a.m., 4 a.m., always when the building was empty. Someone used my credentials to install a new program into the voter verification system. But look at the IP addresses. They're coming from a company called TechVote Solutions. Never heard of them, Marcus said. That's because they didn't exist 6 months ago. James pulled up another screen. They were created by a shell company, which was created by another shell company, which leads back to... He paused for effect. Global Pay-C Industries. Marcus's eyes widened. Global PAC Industries was one of the largest political action committees in the country, known for their massive campaign donations and controversial political strategies. But here's where it gets interesting, James continued. He showed Marcus a series of emails he had managed to recover. The program they installed doesn't just target black voters. That's just phase 1. The real code is buried deeper. A car drove past slowly, its headlights sweeping across them. James ducked down instinctively. They're watching me, he whispered. Yesterday, someone broke into my apartment. They took my work laptop, but they didn't know about my personal backup files. Marcus leaned forward. What's in the real code, James? It's designed to. James stopped suddenly, staring at his screen. Someone's accessing the system right now. They're deleting files. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he tried to save what he could. There. I've copied the main protocol files. Look at this. The screen showed complex lines of code, but at the bottom was a simple comment. Phase 2 activation. Election day +1. Full database modification protocol. In simple English? Marcus asked. They're not just stopping black people from voting. James explained, his voice shaking. They're planning to change vote counts after the election. The voter suppression is just a distraction, making everyone focus on race while they set up something much bigger. Suddenly, bright headlights flooded the car from behind. 2 black SUVs had pulled up, locking them in. Take this. James shoved a USB drive into Marcus's hand. Everything's on here. Get it to Sarah Thompson. She'll know what to. The passenger door was yanked open. 2 men in dark suits reached in and grabbed James. James Chen, one said, "You're under arrest for unauthorized access to government systems and theft of classified information." That's a lie, James shouted as they dragged him out. Marcus, tell them the truth. Show them what's really. The SUV door slammed shut, cutting off his words. Within seconds, both vehicles had disappeared into the night, leaving Marcus alone in the parking lot, clutching the USB drive. His phone buzzed. Sarah, I saw everything. Come to my office now. Bring the drive. As Marcus drove through the empty streets, his mind raced. What they had uncovered went far beyond voter suppression. It was a plot to manipulate the entire election, and now they had proof. But with James arrested and people watching their every move, getting the truth out would be more dangerous than ever. The USB drive felt heavy in his pocket, a small piece of plastic that could change everything if they lived long enough to reveal its contents to the world. Sarah Thompson's office was on the 10th floor of a downtown Atlanta building. At 1:30 a.m., she and Marcus sat hunched over her computer, examining the files from James Chen's USB drive. The city lights twinkled through the windows as they dug deeper into the conspiracy. Look at these financial records, Sarah said, pointing to her screen. TechVote Solutions received $50 million from Global Pay-C Industries, but the money didn't stop there. Marcus leaned closer. Where did it go? It was split into smaller amounts and sent to dozens of fake companies. Then those companies made donations to key political campaigns and hired specific election officials. Sarah pulled up another document. And here's the interesting part. They'd also bought shares in 3 major voting machine manufacturers. But why? Marcus asked, rubbing his tired eyes. Why go through all this trouble? Before Sarah could answer, her office phone rang. They both stared at it. Nobody should be calling her office line at this hour. Sarah put it on speaker. Hello, Miss Thompson. The voice was distorted, as if using a voice changer. Check your email. You have 5 minutes to see it before it disappears. The line went dead. Sarah quickly opened her email. There was a new message from an anonymous sender with a video attachment. She clicked play. The video showed a meeting in a luxurious office. They recognized several people, the CEO of Global Pasty Industries, 2 state senators, and the head of the Election Commission. They were discussing their plan. Once Phase 1 creates enough chaos with the black voters, one man was saying, nobody will notice Phase 2. The new system won't just change votes. It will create a perfect paper trail. Everything will look legitimate. And the profit projections? Another man asked. Over $2 billion in government contracts once our candidates win. The infrastructure bill, the defense contracts, everything goes to our companies. The voter suppression story gives us perfect cover. The media will be so busy with the racial angle, they'll miss the bigger picture. The video ended abruptly. When Sarah tried to replay it, the email had already vanished. We need to make copies of everything, Marcus said urgently. They'd already got to James. We could be next. Sarah nodded and started copying files to multiple drives. We should split up the evidence. It's safer that way. Suddenly, Marcus's phone buzzed. It was a text from Jenny, the poll worker. They're saying James Chen committed suicide in his cell. I know it's not true. Be careful. Sarah's hands froze over the keyboard. They killed him. We need help, Marcus said. This is too big for just us. Sarah thought for a moment. I know someone. Judge Williams. He handled major corruption cases before joining the federal court. He's always been fair, even in politically charged cases. As she reached for her phone, the lights in the office went out. The whole floor was dark except for their computer screens. That's not a coincidence, Marcus whispered. They heard the elevator ding. Sarah quickly finished the file transfer and handed Marcus one of the drives. Take the back stairs. Get this to Judge Williams. His home address is inside the drive. I'll take the other copy and... The office door burst open. 3 men in suits entered, followed by 2 police officers. Sarah Thompson, one officer said, you're under arrest for cybersecurity violations and attempting to compromise election systems. That's ridiculous. Marcus stepped forward, but Sarah caught his arm. Go, she whispered. Get the truth out. As the officers led Sarah away, she held her head high. You can arrest me, she said loudly, but you can't stop the truth. We have proof of everything. Marcus slipped out through the back stairs while the officers were busy with Sarah. His heart pounded as he ran down 10 flights of stairs, the precious drive secure in his pocket. The truth about the election fraud was bigger than anyone had imagined. It wasn't just about stopping black voters. It was about money, power, and corruption at the highest levels. And now, with James Chen dead and Sarah arrested, Marcus was one of the few people left who could expose it all. As he rushed through the dark streets toward Judge Williams's house, he knew the next few hours would determine whether their democracy would survive or fall to the greatest election fraud in history. The Atlanta Convention Center was packed. People from every background, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, filled the huge room. It was 2 p.m., just 24 hours after Marcus's meeting with Judge Williams, and the atmosphere was tense. Marcus stood backstage, watching the crowd through the curtains. Many held signs about voter suppression. They were divided. Different groups stood separately, some glaring at others with suspicion. Are you sure about this? Jenny asked, adjusting the technical equipment. They had set up a huge screen on stage, ready to show their evidence. Sarah's right, Marcus replied, holding up his phone with her text message. The truth unites. Agent Chen walked up, talking on his phone. FBI teams are in position. FB executives are having an emergency board meeting right now. They know something's coming. Judge Williams joined them, straightening his tie. The media's here. All major networks, plus live streaming, will have the nation's attention. Marcus took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The crowd's angry murmurs grew louder. Some people started shouting. My people can't vote, yelled a black community leader. You're trying to steal the election. Someone else shouted back. Marcus raised his hands. Everyone, please. What if I told you we're all being cheated the same way? The crowd grew quieter, curious. For the past day, we've seen protests across the country. Black voters blocked by registration problems. White voters finding their votes changed. Hispanic voters sent to wrong locations. We thought we were fighting each other. But look at this. Jenny started the presentation. On the huge screen, lines of code appeared, then simplified diagrams showing how the voting system worked. This is the software controlling our elections, Marcus explained. Look what happens in different neighborhoods. The screen split into 3 parts, showing real-time data. Black neighborhoods. 60% of voters marked registration invalid. White neighborhoods. 55% of votes subtly changed after being cast. Hispanic neighborhoods. 58% directed to incorrect polling places. The crowd grew silent. We're not each other's enemies, Marcus continued. International Finance Partners, IFP, created this system. They wanted us fighting while they stole our democracy. He showed the money trails, the fake companies, the billion-dollar government contracts. With each revelation, the mood in the room changed. People who had been standing apart began to move closer together. Sarah's voice suddenly boomed through the speakers. She had called from jail, and Jenny patched her through. They thought they could divide us, Sarah said. But Americans have faced corrupt power before. We've always fought back, together. A black grandmother stood up. They tried to stop me from voting. Said my registration was invalid after 40 years. They changed my vote. A white farmer called out. I saw it switch right on the screen. They sent my whole community to an empty building, a Hispanic activist added. The room erupted in conversation as people began sharing their stories, realizing they had all been victims of the same scheme. Suddenly, Agent Chen rushed onto the stage. FBI teams are moving in. They're arresting IFP executives right now. The crowd cheered. On the screen, live news footage showed FBI agents entering IFP's headquarters and leading executives out in handcuffs. Judge Williams took the stage, but our fight isn't over. We need to fix the system. We need every community working together to create fair elections that represent all Americans. People began exchanging phone numbers, forming committees, planning actions. Community leaders who had been arguing earlier now stood together, organizing joint efforts to monitor polling stations. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. Case dismissed. All charges dropped. On my way, keep them united. As he watched the crowd, Marcus saw something powerful happening. The anger was still there, but it had found its true target. Instead of fighting each other, people were joining forces to fight corruption. A young black activist shook hands with a white rural organizer. Different neighborhoods, same problem, she said. Same solution, too, he replied. We worked together. The convention center was no longer filled with divided groups, but with Americans united in a common cause. It wasn't just about saving this election anymore. It was about saving democracy itself. And for the first time since this crisis began, Marcus felt sure they would win. Judge Williams' colonial-style house sat on a quiet street in the wealthy part of Atlanta. At 3 a.m., Marcus rang the doorbell, constantly looking over his shoulder for any signs of being followed. The porch light clicked on, and Judge Williams, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair, opened the door in his bathrobe. Mr. Washington, do you know what time it is? Your Honor, I apologize, but this can't wait. Marcus held up the USB drive. We've uncovered something massive about the election fraud. Sarah Thompson sent me. The judge's expression changed at Sarah's name. He quickly ushered Marcus inside, checking the street before closing the door. In the judge's home office, Marcus explained everything: the voter suppression, James Chen's murder, Sarah's arrest, and the hidden money trail. Judge Williams listened carefully while examining the files on his computer. This goes deeper than you realize, the judge said finally, pulling out an old leather briefcase. What you've discovered connects to a case I've been secretly investigating for months. He spread out documents across his desk. Look at this. The voter suppression targeting black communities isn't just happening in Georgia. It's happening in 12 states, all using the same software system. Marcus leaned forward. TechVote Solutions? Yes, but that's not the whole story. The judge pulled up a complex diagram on his computer. We thought Global Pasty Industries was behind everything, but they're just another piece of the puzzle. Look who really owns all these companies. Marcus's eyes widened as he followed the ownership trails. Every company, including Global Pasty, led back to one massive corporation, International Finance Partners, IFP. IFP controls 60% of all government contracts, Judge Williams explained. Defense, infrastructure, healthcare, everything. They make billions when certain politicians win, but this time they got greedy. They wanted total control. But why target black voters specifically? Marcus asked. Because they needed a distraction. A new voice said. Both men turned. Jenny, the poll worker, stood in the doorway, accompanied by an FBI agent who showed his badge. Agent David Chen, he said. James Chen was my brother. We've been investigating IFP for 2 years. Jenny stepped forward. I'm not really a poll worker. I'm a cybersecurity expert working with the FBI. We planted me inside to gather evidence. Marcus sat back, stunned. So the voter suppression was meant to create chaos and outrage. Agent Chen finished. While everyone focused on racial discrimination, IFP's real plan was moving forward. They're not just changing votes. They're installing a system that would let them control every major government contract for the next decade. But we have a bigger problem, Jenny added, turning on the TV. Breaking news flashed across the screen. Demonstrations were erupting across the country. Black communities were protesting voter suppression, while others were protesting what they called election interference investigations. That's their plan, Judge Williams said grimly. Create division, make everyone focus on race, while they rob the country blind. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from Sarah's office phone. His heart jumped, but the message was strange. The truth unites. Check the pattern. Every divide makes them stronger. S. Marcus stared at the message. Suddenly, he understood. We've been looking at this wrong, he said. They didn't just target black voters. The system was targeting everyone differently. Black communities with registration problems, white communities with machine malfunctions, Hispanic communities with wrong polling locations. They wanted everyone pointing fingers at each other. Agent Chen nodded. While the country fights itself, IFP takes control of everything. So how do we stop them? Marcus asked. Judge Williams smiled for the first time that night. By telling the whole truth, not just about black voter suppression, but about how they're playing all Americans against each other. We show everyone the real enemy. And I know how to prove it, Jenny said, pulling out her laptop. The same code that's blocking black voters is also changing vote counts in white neighborhoods and redirecting Hispanic voters to fake polling sites. Once people see they're all being cheated the same way, they'll unite against the real criminals, Marcus finished. As they worked through the night, Marcus thought about Sarah's message. The truth wasn't just about exposing voter suppression. It was about showing how a greedy corporation was trying to divide and conquer America itself. The next few days would determine whether the people would see through the deception and come together, or fall for the biggest con in American political history. The next morning, Sarah Thompson stood at the steps of the federal courthouse, surrounded by hundreds of supporters from every community. Her business suit was wrinkled from her night in jail, but her eyes were bright with determination. Today, she announced to the crowd and news cameras, "We present our evidence to the Federal Election Commission. But IFP isn't going down without a fight." She was right. As if on cue, a group of expensive lawyers in dark suits marched up the courthouse steps. Leading them was Richard Maxwell, IFP's chief legal officer, wearing a smile that looked more like a sneer. "Ms. Thompson," he said loudly enough for the news cameras to hear, "this is a sad attempt to disrupt a legal election. We have proof that you and Mr. Washington fabricated everything." Marcus, standing beside Sarah, felt his heart skip. They hadn't expected this. Maxwell held up a folder. "We have signed statements from tech experts saying the voting system is perfectly legal. We have evidence that you paid James Chen to lie. And we have this." He pulled out a document with Sarah's signature on it. "A contract showing you were paid by our political opponents to create this scandal." Maxwell finished triumphantly. The crowd murmured. Some people looked uncertain. but Sarah smiled. "Interesting documents, Mr. Maxwell," she said. "Just one problem." She nodded to Jenny, who pressed a button on her laptop. The courthouse's giant public screen lit up with security camera footage. It showed Maxwell himself in a late-night meeting, instructing people how to forge documents and signatures. Maxwell's face went pale. "That's not all." Agent Chen stepped forward. "While you were busy creating fake evidence, we were following your money trail. Would you like to explain why IFP transferred $10 million to offshore accounts this morning?" More footage appeared on the screen. IFP executives shredding documents, deleting files, and transferring money, all captured by FBI surveillance. But Maxwell had one last card to play. He snapped his fingers, and suddenly, news alerts started buzzing on everyone's phones. Breaking news claimed that Sarah and Marcus were under investigation for election tampering themselves. "Check your sources," someone in the crowd shouted. Jenny was already on it. On the big screen, she showed how the fake news stories originated from websites controlled by IFP. Then something unexpected happened. A man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd. Everyone recognized him. Michael Foster, IFP's chief technology officer. "I can't do this anymore," he announced, his voice shaking. "Everything they're saying is true. I helped design the system. It was supposed to be about election security, but they turned it into a weapon. I have proof." He handed a hard drive to Agent Chen. Maxwell's face turned from pale to green. More IFP employees started coming forward. A software engineer, a project manager, an accountant, each with their own evidence of the company's corruption. "You can't stop this by attacking us," Sarah told Maxwell. "The truth has too many witnesses now." The crowd had grown larger. News helicopters circled overhead. Live streams reached millions. People across the country watched as IFP's carefully built lies crumbled. Judge Williams arrived with a team of federal marshals. "Richard Maxwell," he announced, "you and your associates are under arrest for election fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." As Maxwell and his lawyers were led away in handcuffs, the crowd cheered. But Sarah raised her hands for quiet. "This isn't just our victory," she said. "Every community came together for this. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, we all saw through their lies. We all chose truth over division." Marcus stepped to the microphone. "But we're not finished. We need to rebuild our election system, make it truly secure, truly fair. Not just for some of us, for all of us." The crowd roared in agreement. Community leaders began organizing committees right there on the courthouse steps. Election experts volunteered to help design a new, transparent system. Civil rights leaders from different communities joined hands, ready to work together. As the sun set behind the courthouse, Sarah looked at the united crowd. People who had been suspicious of each other just days ago, now working together to protect their democracy. "They thought they could divide us to conquer us," she told Marcus. "Instead, they united us and destroyed themselves." But both knew this was just the beginning. They had won this battle, but the fight for true election integrity was just starting. At least now, they would fight it together. 6 months later, Sarah Thompson stood in the Rose Garden of the White House. The spring sun shone brightly as she watched the president sign the Fair Elections Protection Act into law. Behind her stood Marcus, Jenny, Agent Chen, Judge Williams, and representatives from communities across America. "This law," the president announced, "ensures that what happened 6 months ago can never happen again. But the real heroes aren't the politicians. They're the ordinary Americans who stood together to protect our democracy." Sarah thought back to everything that had led to this moment. After IFP's arrest, the truth had sparked major changes. In a spacious courtroom 3 months earlier, Richard Maxwell and 23 other IFP executives stood before Judge Williams for sentencing. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Thousands of documents, witness testimonies, and digital records showed their plot to manipulate the election. "The court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison," Judge Williams declared, his voice firm. "Your attempt to divide Americans and steal their votes was not just a crime against democracy. It was a crime against the very spirit of our nation." Maxwell's face turned gray as he was led away. His expensive suit couldn't hide his defeat. But the story didn't end with punishments. Real change was happening across the country. "Marcus," Now, a Pulitzer Prize nominee for exposing the scandal walked through a new voting center in Atlanta. Computer screens showed the transparent voting system that Jenny had helped design. Every vote could be verified, every change tracked, and every voter protected. "See these terminals?" Jenny explained to a group of visitors. "They're monitored by a diverse committee of election experts and community representatives. No single person or company can change anything without everyone knowing." The most remarkable change was in the communities themselves. Sarah watched as former rivals worked together at a national election security conference. "My people were hurt by voter suppression," said Reverend Jackson, a black community leader. "And my people were fooled by vote changing," added Mike Thompson, a white rural organizer. "Now we protect each other's votes," they said together. The new law required independent verification of all voting systems, multi-community oversight committees, transparent vote counting processes, severe penalties for election tampering, regular system audits by diverse teams, easy access to voting for all communities. Back in the Rose Garden, Sarah stepped up to the podium after the president finished speaking. "6 months ago, we discovered a plot to steal our democracy," she said. "They thought they could divide us by race, by politics, by neighborhood. Instead, we came together. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, we all realized that our votes matter only if everyone's vote matters." She looked at the crowd. James Chen's parents were there, proud that their son's sacrifice helped save American democracy. Jenny sat with her FBI colleagues, including Agent Chen, who now led a new election security task force. Marcus stood with other journalists who had helped spread the truth. Community leaders who once distrusted each other now sat together, planning future cooperation. "But our work isn't finished," Sarah continued. "Democracy isn't something we can take for granted. It needs all of us, working together, staying vigilant, protecting each other's rights." After the ceremony, Sarah found a quiet moment with Marcus in the White House garden. "Did you ever think that investigating black voters being turned away would lead to all this?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "I thought we were uncovering one injustice. Instead, we found that injustice against any of us is a threat to all of us." Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a message from Judge Williams. "Turn on the news." They looked at Sarah's phone to see breaking news. Voters from all communities were turning out in record numbers for local elections. The reporter interviewed people at polling stations across the country. "I'm here because we learned our votes matter," said a young black woman. "I'm voting to honor those who exposed the truth," added an elderly white man. "We vote together now," said a Hispanic mother. "It protects everyone." Sarah smiled at Marcus. What had started with black voters being barred had ended with all Americans standing together, protecting their right to vote and making their democracies stronger than ever. The truth hadn't just set them free, it had united them.